Hello, welcome back to the podcast. For those of you who are new here, hi, I'm Rennie. I go by at Just Riri Shop online, and welcome to my podcast. I'm gonna go ahead and just dive right in. I just want to start by saying that I recognize that we are in an extremely heavy time right now collectively, and I also know that a lot of us are struggling personally with just transformation and transition in our daily lives as well, on top of everything that we're witnessing, nationally and globally. And it's very overwhelming. And I want to talk a little bit about that, and hopefully give some perspective that can help all of us through this season because it's been a doozy. And this has been, for me personally, like one of the most transformative but also challenging years that I've had since probably 2020. So, yeah, I just want to talk about it. To start, I want to say we're definitely like in a season for those of you who are like spiritual into astrology and so forth, where we just we're wrapping up eclipse season, and so it's been very intense, and there's so many crazy transits this year, but there's so much happening astrologically that I personally believe is very much influencing how many of us are feeling right now, and especially the intensity at which we're experiencing change and transformation. And I really want to talk about just how difficult it is to release things, and just the importance of not settling. And I think that for people who struggle with mental health issues, or whether you have any diagnoses or not, one thing that I feel like I've come to understand is that for many of us, feeling unfulfilled and like we're in relationships or friendships or work environments or so forth that are just not fulfilling for us can definitely contribute to and worsen a lot of our mental health conditions. And I feel like for me, seeking purpose filled not only like work, but just activities and relationships, just seeking purpose in all aspects of my life. And even like the small things that I do is something that has been helping me. And I've been struggling a lot for the past couple of weeks, especially, but over the past couple of months, was really setting boundaries and sticking to boundaries, not just like with other people, but with myself. Self-discipline is something I've struggled with for a lot. And with so much change happening in my personal life right now, it's been really hard. And so I just really want to talk about that because I think that one thing that many of us might struggle with is just this feeling of like we don't want to settle. And I feel like for a lot of us, with everything going on, many of us are kind of in a stage of our life where it feels pointless to continue to stay in relationships or friendships or environments or whatever that just aren't not working for us, aren't aligned, aren't serving us, and aren't fulfilling us. Especially like with everything that we're seeing, because I don't know if everyone feels this way or resonates, but for me, what I witness, all of the change that I'm witnessing happening, good and bad, is just reminding me why it's so important to live a life that I actually want to live because life is short. I know that's a cliche. I say a lot of cliches on here, unironically, and I have a love-hate relationship with them, but it's true. Like a lot of these things are true. And I just don't want to spend my entire life being miserable, being in unfulfilling environments or relationships when I know that there are other options. And right now, what I'm struggling with is recognizing that to be that type of person that can't settle and isn't comfortable with the status quo and wants to be fulfilled and live like a purposeful and happy life and not just be stable, as that's a common term used in the mental health community for those who are managing their mental health, right? I don't want to just be stable. I don't want to just be focused on output. That to me is not something that sounds sustainable for a person like me, a creative. Or it sounds like something that honestly makes me want to continue to try so hard to fight my mind. I need more than that. I need purpose and I need fulfillment and joy. And so one thing that I've just really been struggling with this year is just the reminder that that takes a lot of effort and energy, and it takes discipline too. It takes discipline not only with, being consistent with the things that I know actually help me, but also with letting go of the things that aren't for me. And that's something that I feel like I've been continuously learning over the past couple of years, but especially this year. I've just like I feel like just everything kind of came to a head this year, and I just realized that there comes this point, I think, for many people, maybe not, I don't know, but I think people who struggle to settle in life, where you realize that if you don't wake up one day and choose, like, this is the life that I want, and this is what I'm going to, I'm gonna fight for it, I'm gonna do what I need to do to get to it, I'm gonna, like, there has to be a point. And I feel like for some people, that requires reaching rock bottom. I think that I'm one of those people. I historically felt like I've learned best from experience, so I felt like I was someone who have always had to learn the hard way, and now I'm shifting a little bit out of that, and like I'm open to more wisdom and guidance because I've gone through a lot of things that have not been great. Historically speaking, I did have to learn through experience, and now I'm recognizing that I am not the type of person that can settle, but also this requires self-discipline. This requires boundaries. This requires like there's a lot that comes with being truly happy and fulfilled and living a purposeful life that fuels you on a spiritual core level and doesn't just make you content or doesn't just provide stability. So I feel like part of the recovery journey for all of us should be determining what type of person we are and what we really want out of this life. If it's stability, then what your recovery looks like is going to be vastly different than if it's freedom or if it's creativity or if it's fulfillment. For me, I really feel that I'm the type of person that needs to live a purposeful life. I will continue to go through these cycles of just getting extremely depressed and pushing everyone away and self-sabotaging or being having these self-destructive patterns resurface in a cyclical way where I'm having to examine time and time again why I'm pushing people away or why certain patterns of behaviors are showing up in my life again. And one thing that I just had to come to terms with is that this is going to be something that I struggle with if I am not living a life that is in alignment with what it is that I truly want. If it feels like I'm not aligned with who I really am and it's not purposeful to me, then at some point, whether it's a relationship or a job or whatever, it's not going to work out. It has to be something I genuinely care about, and it has to be something that's aligned with where I'm at whatever stage of life I'm in. And if it feels off in any way, if it's draining me constantly, if I feel like I'm not really able to show up and be my true authentic self, then it's going to impact my mental health negatively. And I'll start to see these, old unhealthy patterns of behaviors show up again. It's kind of like a warning to me when something is out of alignment in my life now. I'm able to recognize that. And then, I think in the past I struggled with knowing what to do with that because there is a big part of me that does crave stability. And so I just kind of have to be really honest with myself. Is it stability that I crave more than freedom, more than purpose? It's not that you can't have multiple, but for me, it was definitely something I had to sit with because that is what helped me decide like what path, like what actions I need to take, like what aligned actions do I need to take based off of what it is that I'm actually desiring and what it is that I feel like I need in order to feel okay, happy, stable, fulfilled. While stability is important to me, I realized recently that freedom and fulfillment are more important to me than stability. So that means that I'm willing to take risky actions like leave, environments, work environments, even if it means that I might struggle financially. I'm willing to leave relationships, even if that means that I might have to move or like, be uprooted. This has been one of those years where I've experienced all of those things, like just changes in career and relationship. And this season especially, feel very, I don't want to say directionless, but definitely there's a lot shifting that feel outside of my control and it's very uncomfortable, but I had to understand that it's because I chose to do things that feel right for me, even if it doesn't make sense to other people. And I feel like that's where a lot of us are in our life, is where it's like I feel like I've been doing things that I feel like I should do based off what I was either conditioned to believe from family or society as a whole or whatever, or based on like an older version of myself that I'm realizing isn't aligned, right? I feel like a lot of us are going through that. Like we have changed, and that's life. Like life does that, experiences do that. We have collectively gone through shared trauma in the past 5 years with COVID and with everything that's been happening, especially if you're someone who's based in like countries where there's a lots of different, social unrest and just tons of things for us to worry about and fear and have anxiety over, right? We live in a world that is very heavy and dense right now. And so, of course, it makes sense that we're in this position where we're thinking, we're kind of reviewing all of the aspects of our life and really sitting with ourselves about what it is that we want and need and what we want to see, because tomorrow is not promised, And so I think as we are reflecting, what's important, in my opinion, for us to really take a look at is how are we acknowledging what it is that we need, on a deep personal level at this particular stage of life, because this is subject to change, right? And how can we accept that maybe the things that we thought we wanted, we no longer want, the things we thought would be aligned, maybe forever even, aren't aligned anymore. And maybe we don't feel good about the changes that are taking place in our life or that we feel are needed in our life, but how can we practice radical acceptance of where we are and just be honest with ourselves about what is not working for us, and then really focus on the actions, the boundaries, and the discipline that's required in order to fully allow ourselves to smoothly flow into this next season of life. And that's something that I'm struggling with because I say that I like change, but it is very difficult for me to let go of older versions of myself. And I see, my patterns very clearly now. And it can be really difficult for me to really sit with and accept that there are just some things that I can't carry with me into a new season of life, whether that be friendships or relationships or even like mental, like thought forms, like different beliefs that I've held for a long time that I've now had to sit with and challenge, or whether it be work environments or so forth. And I just feel like when we talk about life transition and changes, a lot of it, I mean, for what I've been seeing anyway, a lot of the conversation really focuses on the external more than what's happening internally. Like it could be exciting to be navigating changes, but and I think we can be really honest about how scary it can be as well, and like how overwhelming it can feel. But I feel like what we don't really focus on as much, and something that's been coming up for me all year, is just the grief. Like it's hard to accept sometimes. Like if you're someone right now that's going through relationship changes, for example, it can be really hard to like come to terms with the fact that a relationship that at some point in your life you thought you wanted forever or you thought would always feel right or always feel aligned no longer does. Whether that's a friendship or a family member or a romantic partner, whatever, it can hurt so much to even accept the fact that it's done or it's coming to an end or it's just not aligned. And I feel like for some of us, especially those who struggle with people pleasing or, aren't confrontational or struggle to choose themselves in a lot of situations, or that might feel selfish or they've been conditioned to feel that that feels selfish, it can be really hard to not only even like take the external action, right? Like having those conversations, but like accepting within yourself that this isn't for you anymore. And for those who really crave stability or feel that they need stability, And especially like if you are someone who struggles with mental health issues or you're neurodivergent and that stability is really required to maintain, like to be regulated, to have your nervous system feel okay, then it can be really, really discombobulating to even accept that something has to change. And I feel like this is the reason why a lot of people don't end up making changes that can benefit them in the long run because it is scary and it's risky and it feels destabilizing. And a lot of people are not willing to fully allow themselves to go through the discomfort of that in order to become what's required, right? I was listening to someone, a YouTuber, I listen to a lot of like channel messages, and my algorithm is just tons of intuitive messages, which I love, and it's been helping me on this journey a lot. But I forgot who mentioned it, but they mentioned like when butterflies are transforming, they're in a cocoon and, they're covered in goo or whatever. It's not necessarily a process we want to see or as beautiful. But, and they might not even fully understand. We don't know if they fully understand what's actually happening when it's happening. I'm sure it's not fun. And so I think we know that in theory. I think a lot of us kind of like understand that change is difficult and it's uncomfortable. We get it on a mental level, but I feel like actually going through it in the thick of it, allowing ourselves to experience it and remember this is part of our journey of life is going through these hard transformations and letting go of things that aren't for us, even if we really hope that they would be forever or whatever. I think we forget when we're in the thick of it. And I feel like right now, the whole reason I'm yapping about this is because it feels like we're in the thick of it. A lot of us are in the thick of it right now and need this reminder that, if you are in this period where you feel discombobulated and unstable, and it's probably a necessary part of the of this chapter of your life. Um, and what's required for you to become who you need to become in order to get to that next level, And again, I feel like I've mentioned this before. I repeat a lot of things. So if you've listened to previous episodes, I apologize if some of the things I say sound really repetitive, but a lot of it kind of blends into one another. But one thing that I'm just reminding myself recently is that this is part of the process, like we'll have these highs and lows, and every time I feel like I've reached a rock bottom, I have to remind myself. I think it's important for us to take time to evaluate and remind ourselves of just how much we have grown as people and reframing, where we're at and how we're able to handle these difficult seasons of life. Because I would argue, I don't know all of you, you're all strangers to me, but I would argue that from 2020 to now, with everything that's happened in the world, I'm sure some of us have learned better ways to manage the things that we're struggling with. Like the world has been imploding for some time now. So, and it's interesting because I feel like we're a lot of us are very hard on ourselves and we beat ourselves up and we focus on the things that still need to change for the better, the things that still feel out of alignment or the things that still don't feel right, that I don't think we really give ourselves enough credit or take the time to really reflect on how much has changed for the better, even if it's not necessarily what we thought it would be, or it's not necessarily what we thought we wanted, right? Like it doesn't look like what we planned out in our minds, but it's the way we've been handling things are still great or better than we maybe could have anticipated they would be, considering, all of the circumstances of our personal lives and just what's happening collectively. That is something I've been really reminding myself of, and especially as someone who considers myself like a creative and someone who doesn't feel I can settle for the status quo. I have to accept that I'm going to be going through these periods where it feels like I'm starting over and it feels sometimes like I'm at rock bottom because I am not someone who can settle. I am not someone who can stay in environments that don't feel aligned. I'm not someone who can stay in relationships that don't feel aligned. I'm not someone who can do that. I won't be able to do that. So I had to accept that because I'm not someone who settles, because that's who I am. I'm going to be going through seasons of life that feel really difficult and feel really destabilizing, and I'm going to have to get accustomed to starting over and feeling like I'm learning things from scratch again because that is part of what the journey is like for people like me who don't settle. And if you listen to other people who you, you know, admire or aspire to or whatever, if you listen to some of those stories of success, then you'll hear things like that, like periods of time throughout people's business journeys or, journeys of life or relationships or whatever, where they just felt very lost or directionless or like just things took a turn or just things didn't go necessarily the way we'd planned or anticipated, but that's been part of the journey. And there have been lessons in those seasons that help them then maybe come up with strategies or plans or insights that actually got them to exactly where they needed to be doing exactly what they were supposed to be doing to live their most fulfilled, authentic lives. And I'm reminding myself that the seasons of my life in the past, whether, it was when I was a kid or a teenager or young adult or whatever, when I thought I had no idea what was going to go on, and this was just the end of the world. Like, I, in those moments, discovered something that led me down a path that I never thought I would be on, and it ended up being for the best. One example of that was I dropped out of college in 2013 when my brother passed away. And I found out I was pregnant like 6 or 7 months later. And then I didn't feel like I had enough support, whether it was family support or financial support in where we were at the time. So we ended up going to Europe and I, lived in Europe for a couple of years and I had my son there. And I remember during that time, which was a very difficult time for me, I had a lot of issues during that time, um, in so many ways. I think I've talked about it in some previous episode, probably. But I just remember feeling afraid for my future and for my son's future because of how unstable things were during that time of my life and how much I had to lean on the support of others because I didn't have it for myself at that time and just struggling so much and feeling so lost and feeling like there's just no way out of this. Like, I don't know how my life is going to like, I don't know. I could not picture a way out of that situation. I wasn't even sure how I was going to be able to get back to the States at that point. I was like, I don't even know if we'll ever even be able to afford to with the situation that we were in there. And I wasn't able to work. I couldn't speak the language. It was really difficult. It was a challenging time. So it's so interesting because during that time, I had so much free time aside from caring for my baby boy, obviously. But I started to really take the time to think about what it is that I like or what it is that I wanted to do. And I, was doing like just coming across some random stuff. And it's how I ended up discovering like my career at the time. Like had never heard of PR. I had never heard of that. And I didn't know what it was, but I was really interested in YouTubers and content creators. And I was watching a lot of content. And I remember some of them talking about how they were studying communications and PR. And I was like, what is that? I'm interested in the creator space, right? About at the time I was making YouTube videos, vlogs, family vlogs, and stuff like that. And so I ended up looking into it and then I ended up contacting my college about it and just kind of explaining my situation, hopes of re-enrolling and getting back. And I ended up being able to do that. I had to have some support. I had to have some help, of course. It wasn't easy at all. It wasn't easy to figure it out, but it ended up being figured out and I ended up coming back and majoring in PR. Couple years after that, I graduated ended up with a really good job before I even graduated and then moved to California. That's been my career since. I've had some really, I would say, incredible milestones in my career too. So it's so interesting to look back on those moments of my life where I was just so convinced that like there was no way out of those situations. And I I think it's easy for us to kind of lose sight of it again when we're in the thick of the transformation and the difficulties. It's kind of easy for us to forget how much we've already learned, how much we've already grown, how much we've already overcome, and just how resilient we are. And I think it can be frustrating also. I think especially as a Black woman, resilient is a word that I feel a lot of mixed feelings about because I think many of us who've had to be strong and just survive and get through difficulties time and time and time again, like we're sick of it. And I think a lot of people feel that way, just kind of jaded and burnt out with all of the things that we've had to go through and navigate over the past 5 years plus. For many of us, it's been like a lifetime of transition and change and instability and stress. And it can be overwhelming to think, oh, like I don't want to go through more things. But I think that's where that reframe is important because as bittersweet as it is an important reminder during challenging times like right now that we do have the tools and we do have, some skills in our arsenal that can help us get through and navigate these times. Like what's going on is not the first time for some of us. Like we have witnessed corruption and terrible things. We have some of us have experienced this already. Like many of our communities have been going through difficulties like this for a while. It's not necessarily new. I know that things right now are definitely if it's different. But at the same time, there's always been injustice, there's always been corruption, there's always been people being tortured. We didn't have access to this much information to know exactly what was happening, but I assure you that it's been happening. It's been happening to people, including in this country, in your own communities. And most people didn't care because it wasn't impacting them, right? And so being from a community that's always been targeted and that's always been negatively impacted, I have to remind myself that like I do have some of the knowledge, skills, and tools to navigate some of the challenges that, you know, I'm facing personally and globally. And we need to remind ourselves that when we're going through these transformations, and especially if we're people who are currently going through transformations because we chose ourselves, because we are striving for better for ourselves, even amid everything that's going on. That's what's going to help us not only create a better life for ourselves and our families, but for all of us, is for us to continue to push and fight for the life that we know we deserve and to learn how to choose ourselves and to not settle. Um, and so I want to talk a little bit before I go about in practice what it looks like to set boundaries with ourselves and others, because this is something that I've been working on and I feel like I've struggled to take a really balanced approach to this. It's kind of always been very black or white for me, where I was either overextending, overgiving, chasing, and putting all my energy outside of myself, or I was just completely cutting myself off from any potential good or connections because I was so burnt out or disappointed or felt betrayed from previous situations to where now I don't want anything to do with anybody, right? Now it's like I will cut anybody off. And so I've been really trying to, I still struggle with this because I've been more on this side of it where I feel like I'm isolating from everybody and I don't want to connect with anybody. So I've been trying to figure out a way to take a more balanced approach. And as I'm doing that, I'm just continuously being reminded that boundaries are so important, not just boundaries with others, but like also with myself, because I do struggle with self-discipline. And I think as a neurodivergent person in general, like it's hard for me to stay like focused and consistent. Um, so this is something I've been working on. And I think one thing is to one, just review everything in your life. Um, take an audit, take an audit. It doesn't have to be formal, but I have a Virgo moon, so I like to, write stuff down. But take an audit and just look at like your work environment, your relationships, your friendships, your finances, your health, your family life, like every aspect of your life. Just take an audit and just like review how the relationships or situations are making you feel. If right off the bat you feel like you're over it, you're drained, you're jaded, then that's obviously signaling to you that something needs to change. So then the next thing you need to do is really sit with what you feel needs to change and take the first step that you feel is necessary in order for you to move towards what it is that you need. And sometimes that first step is resting. Sometimes that first step is like And I know, like, for some of us, that sounds like a privilege, and we don't necessarily feel like we have time to really physically rest. And I understand that. And so when I say rest, I want to clarify that I'm not just talking about like sleeping, I'm talking about like mental rest because what happens is that like we're going through these things and we know that things need to change, but we're not even giving ourselves, like our brains, the space to really sit and process it and feel the emotions of it. And some of our nervous systems are so wrecked that we can't even allow ourselves to do that. So we just distract ourselves, we doom scroll, we do other stuff, like we binge watch Netflix or whatever, but we're not really giving our brain a time to just be. And so stillness to me is like that is like a non-negotiable when it comes to these seasons of life. Like grounding and stillness, I cannot stress how important I realize that this is now. I have to go outside and take a walk. I have to turn my phone off for a little bit. I need to turn the screens off. I need to take a bubble bath. So when I say rest, that's what I mean. Like you might need to go touch grass. You might actually really need to go touch grass. You might need to go sit outside in dirt for like an hour, right? And just don't look at your phone. If you have the opportunity to do that, then I encourage you to do that because it's in those moments of stillness and rest and mental rest that you get the most clarity because your nervous system can relax a little bit. So focus on resetting and relaxing your nervous system as much as you can, whether that's a bath or a long shower or reading a book and skipping TikTok or Instagram for the night, whatever. Like just take those small steps and then from there you can continue to take the like small steps. I think taking those small steps is going to help you not be overwhelmed by the changes that you realize are required because sometimes the more you process, the more you realize just how much change is required. And then you can kind of freeze up or like that can cause more overwhelm. I know because I've been there and I am there, so I get it. Um, and then it's deciding from there, like once you kind of know what is and isn't required for you to feel okay or what needs to shift or what relationships need to go, that's when you can also start setting boundaries. So not only taking like those actions that you need to take care of yourself, but also like who do you need to like distance yourself from? What environments do you need to kind of start to plan your exit strategy for? Um, and then what people or places or communities can you actually lean more into? And that's something that I struggle with is because I'm like really good at saying goodbye now. Like my cutoff game is very strong. And I know when something isn't for me anymore. And then I know when it's time for me to peace out. I know when it's time to go. I've gotten very good at that. But what I struggle with is like knowing how to be consistent in spaces and relationships that actually do feel good for me and knowing what it means to show up fully in those spaces. And that's something in those relationships as well. And it's something that I'm learning how to do without going back into old habits or self-sabotaging because I'm so used to being disappointed. And that's I've talked about that before too. And that's something that I can elaborate more from where I'm at now in a different episode. But yeah, it starts there, those baby steps, and then auditing, what it is that needs to change and then starting to set those boundaries. And sometimes that means starting small. For some of us, maybe we don't all have that cutoff game that I do. So you might need to start with just maybe there are people in your life that you talk to or that have access to you a little bit more regularly than you would like. And now it's time for you to kind of either communicate that you need more space or just take a step back and then you can come back and explain why you needed that space. Or maybe it's time for you to start looking into alternative options if you feel like your work environment isn't working out for you. Maybe it's time to start putting a plan together. Or maybe it's time for you to start looking at new places or spaces that you can go to because maybe your home situation isn't working out for you. And I understand too for some people that these particular things don't feel within our control. So if that is the case for you, where it's kind of like, okay, there's some things that I would love to change, but they can't right now for whatever reason, right? Then really focus in on what you can control at that stage of your life and really put all of your energy into that. If you are in an environment, maybe you're living at home with family for whatever reason or so forth, and you're just like, oh, I want, like, this isn't healthy for me, how can you set boundaries within that environment? How can you create spaces for yourself that feel safe within that environment if you can? How can you go out and find people or spaces that feel supportive for you? Or how can you find hobbies or things to do or ways to relax that feel regulating for you? If you are in spaces or in a season of life where it feels like there's some things that are just so out of your control that it's really like leading to more instability for you. Um, there's always something, even if it's small, and even if it feels insignificant, sometimes the things that feel the most insignificant are the most significant things. And that's something I'm learning. Like for me, it's like even just like going outside to take a walk or even just making myself a healthy meal because I struggle with that when I'm really stressed out. Like those small things we do for ourselves can make a big difference. And then like thinking about ways to have those conversations with people where like the relationship sort of things aren't aligned or it just needs to change. If you're in a position where it feels too overwhelming to start to have those conversations, I think that for me, that's where I focus more on grounding and finding stability within my own body and nervous system because that will give me the rest and the mental space needed to really formulate what it is I want to say and how I want to say it. And also just plan myself for whatever response or reaction I get, knowing that how people respond to me setting boundaries and taking care of myself is a reflection of them, not a reflection of me. And there's always a way for us to present our needs in a way that's loving, and we still have no control over how people respond to that, even if we try our best to approach it from the most diplomatic, loving way, right? I've had some instances of this show up in my life recently where I felt like I was just speaking my truth as openly and honestly and diplomatically as possible. It's still not going to be met with, it's never going to be met with the exact way you do it because everyone's different, right? And like some of us aren't doing the inner work and some of us will project, right? And so just like knowing that you've taken the time to take care of yourself and get yourself in a balanced enough state to be able to prepare for whatever type of reaction that you might receive from setting those boundaries. Because I think for me anyway, one of the hardest parts of learning to be disciplined and set boundaries and do what you need to do with other people is anticipating difficult, reactions or conflict or, that can add so much stress. And sometimes we end up not taking the actions we know we need to take because we want to avoid that, especially if we are people who are non-confrontational. I am not. I am very confrontational. But still, like if you are that type of person, that can hinder us sometimes from taking the actions we know are necessary for us. And sometimes what's needed is for us to just take that time to process and take care of ourselves first so that we have the strength and we have like we're regulated enough to be able to go into any potential conflict or difficulties that might arise from you deciding to choose yourself, essentially. So I hope this is helpful. I want to share like more specific, practical tips when it comes to these things, but I also realize I've already been talking for a long time, so I'm gonna go ahead and end it here. I really truly hope that during the season this very challenging season that you all remember how much you've gotten through and like how much you have survived up until this point in your life. And also that even when you feel alone, I promise you, there is always someone out there who gets it, even if it doesn't feel that way. And change is difficult and it does require effort, it does require discipline, it does require boundaries. And those are things that we learn through practice. We're not just going to wake up one day and have it all figured out. And especially when everything around us feels like it's collapsing or just like going haywire, we have to be compassionate with ourselves. Like we have to give ourselves grace. And I stress this all the time because I'm really bad at it. So I'm saying this because I know so many of us are really bad at it. It can be really easy for us to beat ourselves up and not remember how much we've learned and how much we've grown up until now and how much we're always going to be learning and growing. We're going to be making mistakes. We're going to fuck up. We're going to have seasons of life where it feels like we're regressing. But what matters most is that we keep trying. It requires practice. And so I really hope that if you're feeling so tired and so overwhelmed right now in life, that you don't give up and that you remember that you don't know what's on the other side of that, right? So just keep trying, keep striving. And I really hope that things get easier for those of us who are navigating a lot of massive transition in life. It's not easy, but I think that as long as we're fighting to live a purposeful life, then it's worth it. So I'll leave it there. Thank you for listening up until now. Please subscribe or follow the podcast on YouTube, Spotify, wherever you are. I appreciate you so much. And until next time, bye.